Hello, welcome to today's show. I'm Jacqueline Stockwell, CEO and founder at Leadership Through Data. I inspire and motivate information leaders across the world. Hello, and welcome to today's show. I am joined with Nikki Chapple. Now, Nikki is a principal cloud architecture and a double Microsoft MVP in security and Microsoft 365. She has spent over 35 years helping businesses stay safe and organized online. She is an award-winning speaker, an author, and co-host of all things Microsoft 365 compliance. And most importantly, Nikki and I are speaking together in June at Experts Live in London, and our session is called Women in Tech. Real stories, real change. Nikki, it's absolutely pleasure to have you on the show today. So, Nikki, we're both getting ready for Experts Live at Code Node. This event is famous for its technical sessions. How does it feel to step away from the technical architecture for a moment to lead a session as personal as Women in Tech?
I think it's really important, actually, because behind all the tech are people. And, we hopefully working in a diverse world. So we need to make sure, we've got the right representation of people in tech. And just unfortunately, we don't seem to have as many women in the tech industry as in other industries. So it's really just to explain, really, there's more to tech than tech.
Yeah, agreed. Because sometimes we can lose our person behind the technology, can't we? And we can focus very much on the technical side, but actually it's leading that people side and saying that we're here and we are delivering these things. So what was it specifically about the panel that made you say, yes, this is a story that I need to tell London?
I think because throughout my career, being in the technical side, well, I've had two roles. Really. I've been in the technical IT side, but I've been in the business side. And I started in tech, moved into more of a business role, and then moved back to tech. And I've kind of seen how maybe teams work in kind of different environments. And it is much harder in the technical arena when you're in a minority of the women. Sometimes, I was in teams where I was the only woman, and sometimes it makes you feel like an outsider, and particularly younger in my career, it was kind of, I felt I had to be twice as good as anyone else to get on. And I think we don't want to have that perception of scaring people away. And we want to just try and say, well, what can we do to, encourage more women in tech?
And do you find that there's a balance in the Microsoft MVP space from women and that more women have MVPs?
I think it depends on which discipline you're looking at. So definitely in the security space, and kind of by looking at more the data security side, I think there's something like 31 or 32 purview MVPs, and only 6 of us are women. And I think in the security space, again, in totality, the number of percentage of women would be even lower, I think. So I think it's important to kind of have some role models out there to encourage the next generation to kind of say, yes, this is a career for me. I don't have to be a man to go into this space.
And for anybody listening, for those women that might want to go into that space, what advice could you give them to move on into that space?
Gosh, that's a hard one, isn't it? Yeah, I think being in tech doesn't have to mean it's a serious technical role. You're developing code, etc. A lot of what I'm doing is collaborating with people, pulling together disparate teams of people, seeking, understanding their problems and problem solving. And I find that, a lot of women are very good at problem solving. Often they have to juggle their outside lives and their work as well. And those are transferable skills that work really well in technology.
Fantastic. Thank you. So at Experts Live, everyone is looking for how-to. So in your 35 years of experience, have you seen the definition of good governance evolve from a tick box exercise to a digital transformation enabler?
It's an interesting question as well. So I think there's been changes. Obviously, there's far more regulations now than there was 35 years ago. So, I think one of the first real big ones was kind of the evolution of things like GDPR. And now we've got not only, things like ISO 27001, but we've got newer regulations specifically AI, things like ISO 001 and the EU AI Act. And I think that regulation is going to get more and more. And this is because the pace of change and the amount of data we're creating is exponentially rising. When I started my career, computers were very, very expensive. So the data we stored, we had to be really careful about what we stored because it was so expensive. We're talking about, large mainframe computers here. So people picked and chose what they wanted. And, especially the analogy is a record. How much music could you put on a record, an album? And there was only so many tracks you could physically put on that piece of vinyl. So people were very choosy about what they got. They were expensive. Now we can go on to things like Spotify and we can get access to any of the music we want. And, it's that sort of analogy. Data and IT storage capacity has become relatively cheap. So I think we throw everything in it, plus the kitchen sink as well. And particularly Microsoft 365, it's that ungoverned data. We don't really know what's in there. And now tools like AI can surface everything super quick. So that's where kind of, oh my gosh, we've got this, data security oversharing risk, kind of what controls do we need to put in. So I'm a great believer in having governance tools. I don't see it as being a blocker. I think it can work in our favour to help us ensure our data stays safe and ensure good productivity.
Yeah, great. So as a dual MVP, how long did it take you to become a dual MVP?
First of all, to become an MVP, it's not based on what you do in your kind of day job. So it's all about your community activities. So it's kind of what you're giving back to the community, and that can be in different forms. So I started off by creating a website where I was kind of sharing some tips and sharing tips on LinkedIn. So it started off with Microsoft Teams because that was the new thing at the time. So I was sharing information there, and I was doing a lot of presentations and things internally in the organization and for customers. And I thought, let's go and share this online. And when lockdown came and there was a lot of online conferences, and we didn't have very much to do. So that was where I kind of put the big focus as this is something to bide my time and everything. So initially just became, I think at that time it was a Teams MVP within the Office 365 space then. And then because more and more I do is kind of good governance, looking at that enterprise architecture, to keep your data safe, you've got to go into the tools of Microsoft Purview. So then I became that dual MVP in the security spaces where Purview sits, plus the Microsoft 365 space as well.
Amazing. So there's a massive focus on AI at the conference this year. What is one compliance trap you see most experts fail to do in it right now?
Well, it's managing a technical debt. So, as I mentioned previously, we've got a lot of data in Microsoft 365. A lot of organizations don't have policies to delete their old data, delete the redundant, obsolete and trivial data. So they kind of keep putting it in SharePoint until SharePoint gets full, and then they buy some more SharePoints. Previously, it was kind of security by obscurity. You had to know where the data is. So now suddenly AI can see that data super quick. They don't, if you've got access to the data, even if you didn't know you had access to the data, it will find it. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that data overexposure. And that's why things like the tools like Purview are suddenly getting the recognition that they deserve.
So Experts Live is in Code Node, and that's in the heart of London developer scene. So for the women in the room who are often the only female voice in a technical environment, what is the real story of how you found your voice in those high stakes environments?
I suppose I've never really been afraid to use my voice. So that was, I suppose, not been my issue. It's whether my voice got equal listening time. I think that was some of the issues, that if I said something it maybe wasn't listened to, but if somebody else said it, maybe it was taken a little bit more seriously. For me, it didn't feel like a level playing field. You know, I had to justify my position more, and I think become more prepared than others to make sure I could answer kind of any questions. So, like, my approach was to become like a deep specialist, um, and be clear on what my values were, and kind of speak with confidence. And for me, that has developed as I've got older in my career. Believe it or not, I was incredibly shy when I started off my career. And I think as you age, you get wiser, and I think that helps.
Yeah, and you're a multi-award winner, a double MVP, an author, a co-host podcast now. So that's sensational from kind of what you've just described to where you are now. So focusing more on our session. So there's 4 of us, there's 5 of us females on the panel, and we've got 1 moderator. We're discussing our individual stories and our experiences within our professions. So if you could mandate one change across the technical ecosystem today to improve inclusivity, what would be at the top of your list?
I think we need to recognise that potentially if you're the only woman in the room, it can be a daunting experience. We need to really create environments where people feel that they belong. I think that's what it is. You need to find your tribe, you know, in effect. You need to feel comfortable where you're working, because you go there, you know, 5 days a week and everything. So I think if you can have that environment where you are encouraged and best can be brought out of you, and kind of people are there to help you succeed, I think then that's where the real change happens. You know, we encourage women to join, and then we kind of support them throughout their career.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, just kind of reflecting on what you've said, is just have that one person in your life that helps you support and motivate you. So mine was a previous line manager that saw my confidence and drive and ambition and kind of really gave me that steer in the right direction. Did you have one of those that supported you? You've talked about the right support.
Yeah, I've had good support, and I've also been in situations where I haven't felt very comfortable, and you know, I've had to call out behaviour as well. So yeah, having someone, you know, there either in work, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody, you know, your line manager, but having somebody who you can sound ideas out to and encourage you. And also sometimes I'm suffering from like imposter syndrome. Are you good enough and everything? You know, it's been able to speak with someone, and sometimes they're like that problem shared is a problem half thing. I think that really helps.
Yeah, agreed. So like a good coach or a mentor
Yeah,
or somebody that you inspire to want to be, make sure that you have the support of them. So thank you. So you were a 2023 security and compliance evangelist. What is an evangelist? Tell me that first.
Yeah, I think that's a posh word for saying, you know, you share your ideas with the wider community. So I have my website where I blog on. I've also got like a YouTube channel as well, where I share information, and I share the content that I speak at an event. So it's kind of been consistently there, you know, trying to get organisations to improve their data security and governance posture.
Nice. So you're phenomenal then, and you rock at those things. How do you sort of keep energized without it being burned out when you're pushing for change in the technical space and the culture of it?
So for me, keeping myself energized, I really enjoy what I'm doing. So I think that's really important. So where I'm doing and preparing some of these things, you know, it's outside of work hours. So for me, it's almost like a hobby as well as a day job. So I think, you know, it's got to be something you like. You've got to be passionate about it, because only then can you be energized. If you're doing something that you don't really like and it's a bit of a drudgery and everything, you know, that can kind of get you down. But like everyone, you have your good days and your bad days. I can wake up in the morning at, you know, 7 o'clock and ping, I'm 100% all days. And other days you kind of get a bit of a cold or something, or it's gloomy or it's raining outside. And you think, you know, and you kind of, your energy feels low. So it's thinking of ways of, well, you know, how can you remain energized, but be pragmatic about it. Not all days are going to be the same.
Agreed, that it's kind of getting yourself into a good mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the things that I've tried recently is cold showers. So like if I'm feeling really tired and really sort of lethargic, I'll cold shower, wide awake, endorphin hits, and also like playing like a really motivational song
Yes.
to get you out of bed is always a good thing. So tell me more about your book. What is the title of your book?
But it's not actually a book. It's I co-authored part of the Microsoft 365 maturity model on governance, risk and compliance. So it's on the Microsoft web pages, and it's all about trying to understand where your current posture is, where you are currently, and then giving you ways to improve. How can we improve ourselves? So like a level 100 is something very basic, it's very reactive. It would be out of the box controls. Whereas level 500, that would be everything is being optimized, but it's not just being optimized. You've got that continual improvement. Your best practice, along with all of the kind of regulations. You're always trying to improve and automate things. And the benefit of this is if somebody comes in and they'll say, hey, Nikki, I want to implement DLP policies or retention policies. Well, you can't just do that. It's a journey. So it's like, my analogy is like planning a journey. I would go onto something like Google Maps. You have to put in where you are to start off with before you plan your journey, and then you choose, how are you going to get there? Am I going to walk? Am I going to take public transport? Am I going to fly, etc.? And depending on that, you're going to get different journeys through to those end goals. But you can't just put the destination in without having that start place. So I think that really helps. Often organisations think maybe that they're doing these things. It's only when you kind of lift the lid off and you think, actually, there are, these are the areas you can improve, and this is your kind of roadmap. And it's not just about the technology side of change, it's about the people, the processes, and the technology as well, because all three of them, have to work together.
I love that. And I love the analogy about going your destinations, because you need people in that, because you need to put something in. So, and that's sensational. And you said that's available on the Microsoft website for listeners to go to?
Yes, if you look up the Microsoft 365 maturity model. So the governance, risk and compliance is just one of the competencies there as well.
Amazing. Thank you. So let's just take us back to our panel for Experts Live, which is on the 11th and the 12th of June. What is the one feeling or one taken away you want the audience to remember?
Yeah, one takeaway is, well, I suppose there's two parts of it. One, this is not a panel just for women to attend. This is everyone's responsibility to look at, so you have to go away thinking, this is my responsibility too. Often we hire skills from outside that maybe overlook people internally, understand the business, the culture and the ways of working. And, it's, can we invest in transferable skills to support internal moves into tech? People that haven't necessarily gone to university and got degrees in the subject, but a lot of the skills I think are transferable. And I think supporting that's where kind of the real change happens.
Yeah, amazing. And I think it's such an important point as well, because I was mentored by a man who was sensationally amazing as well. So shout out to Richard Parsons. Oh, yes. Is there anything else you want to leave with the listeners to take away from today's session?
Yeah, encourage people to come along to the event. So it's on the 11th and 12th of June, isn't it? Come along to the panel, kind of try, I think, just take one thing away and see, have a look at your organisation and see how, we can all take part and make little changes where possible.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your time. How can listeners reach out to you if they want to know more, Nikki?
Well, I've got my website, so that's nikkichapple.com. I've also got a YouTube channel, which I co-host with Ryan John Murphy and Microsoft. That's called All Things M3 Compliance. They're the best ways. Or reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Journals of the Information Entrepreneur with me, Jacqueline Stockwell. I hope you found this episode inspiring and helpful and have some takeaway tips that can be useful to you. If you liked this episode, please like, review and share it with your friends. Your support helps us reach more information leaders to stay inspired and listen to great content. Want to test out your strengths and weaknesses and measure it against our Empower framework? Please complete the scorecard. It's a great way to improve and evaluate your skills. You can find the scorecard at the end of the description of this podcast. Stay tuned for a new podcast every Thursday, and remember to be bold, be brave and be beautiful.